The story begins with the grandeur of an opulent villa nestled along the shimmering waters of Lake Como, Italy. The air was sweet with jasmine drifting from manicured gardens, and in the marble halls of the estate, the life of luxury was on full display. The millionaire Lorenzo Beyonce is a man whose fortune had come from technology ventures during Europe's digital boom of the early 2000s. Born in Milan, but educated abroad, he had cultivated the cosmopolitan tastes of someone who dined in Monaco, wintered in Dubai, and spent summers tucked away in his ancestral Italian villa. His staff was large, but one figure among them stood out for reasons beyond her assigned role. Her name was Amara, a woman of Ghanaian origin who had worked in Italy for over 2 decades. To outsiders, she was just the maid, a quiet, dark-skinned figure moving gracefully through corridors with a dust cloth or a tray. But to those who lived in the house, she was something more, the keeper of rhythm and order, the one who understood everyone's habits better than they themselves did. She knew when Lorenzo liked his espresso, how many olives he wanted in his salad, and the exact temperature he preferred his wine. The night that would change everything started as an ordinary evening. A dinner was planned, private and discreet. Lorenzo had invited only 2 guests, an associate from Rome whose connections to the political class were valuable, and a woman from Milan who was rumored to be more than just a friend. The table was laid with silverware that glinted under chandelier light, and the cellar had been raided for bottles that cost as much as small cars. Yet in the kitchen, Amara's intuition stirred uneasily. She had noticed small things in the days leading up to the dinner. A new bottle of vintage Brunello had appeared in the villa's wine rack, but she could not recall seeing it delivered. The label looked authentic enough, but when she brushed dust from the glass, it came away too easily, as if the age had been staged. That afternoon, when she polished the dining glasses, she saw fingerprints on the neck of the same bottle, prints too recent, too deliberate. As the dinner progressed, laughter and polite conversation floated into the kitchen. Amara moved silently between the rooms, replenishing bread, adjusting candles, removing plates. But when Lorenzo's guest, the political associate, suggested opening the mysterious Brunello, Amara's pulse quickened. She carried the bottle to the table, her hand steady, though her heart raced. She poured into 3 glasses, the rich red, liquid catching the light just as Lorenzo raised his glass. Something inside Amara pushed past the invisible barrier of servitude that so often muted her voice. She spoke not in English, nor in the dialect of her homeland, but in fluent, urgent Italian. Non beva quello, she warned softly yet firmly. Don't drink that. For a moment the world seemed to pause. The clink of forks against porcelain stopped. Lorenzo froze, his glass inches from his lips. The woman beside him gave a startled laugh, assuming perhaps that the maid had grown superstitious. But Lorenzo's eyes narrowed.
Ow.
He had known Amara for years, trusted her judgment in the small rhythms of daily life. For her to interrupt the formality of dinner with a direct command was unprecedented. He set the glass down. The associate, with an amused shrug, lifted his own glass, as if to prove nothing was wrong. Amara stepped forward quickly, her voice sharper now, carrying authority that no one had ever heard from her before. I said, don't drink it. The silence that followed was heavy. Lorenzo studied her face. She was not smiling, not playing some servant's prank. Her eyes were steady, urgent, unflinching. A man who had built empires on instinct, that was enough. He pushed his glass away. Later, the wine would be tested. Later it would be discovered that the liquid was not pure. Someone had tampered with it, replacing the cork with precision and resealing the label. The substance dissolved within the Brunello was a toxin. It was colorless and nearly tasteless. That could have caused organ failure within hours. The revelation shook the villa to its core. Who had planted the bottle? The circle of suspects was uncomfortably small. The associate from Rome suddenly found his position precarious. His excuses grew clumsy under questioning. The woman from Milan vanished from Lorenzo's life within a week, her calls unanswered, her visits unwelcome. But the center of the story was not Lorenzo, the attempted plot. not even the shadowy enemies who had hoped to strike him down through a glass of wine. The true focus became Amara the Black Maid, who had seen what others overlooked, who had dared to break the invisible wall of servitude with a voice that saved a man's life. From that night onward, their relationship changed. Lorenzo, a man who had moved among bankers and ministers, began to see the quiet power in someone who had stood beside him in silence for decades. He listened more. He asked her opinions not only about menus and linens, but about people, choices, risks. Amara herself never sought recognition. When the police came and went, when reports were filed, she withdrew again to her duties, polishing and dusting as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet in whispered conversations among staff, in the cautious nods of neighbors who heard fragments of the story, her name carried new weight. She was not simply a servant anymore. She was the woman whose instinct cut through deception, whose courage in one moment altered the fate of a millionaire. And Lorenzo never again poured himself a glass of wine without first glancing at her, almost unconsciously, as though waiting for the subtle nod of reassurance that it was safe. The incident would never make headlines to private, quite too scandalous for the public eye. But within the villa, among those who knew, it lived on as legend. A single sentence, spoken in Italian by a woman whose voice was rarely acknowledged, had frozen the hand of wealth and power at the edge of danger, and for the rest of his days, Lorenzo would remember the night when the Black Maid spoke, and he lived because he listened.